On 4th of March 2026, SEBI made a massive change for regulatory reporting for AIFs. Instead of a long and detailed quarterly activity report, SEBI said that, well, we are going to give you a simplified quarterly activity report which you can submit, and only one very detailed report which has to be submitted once a year called the annual activity report. And they said that in 3 days we will release the reporting formats on IBC's websites. Well, the reporting formats are here, so let's dive right in to understand what these formats say. Hi everyone, I am Parth from Navigate AIF, and we are a legal tech company on a mission to transform complex SEBI regulations into actionable insights. In this video, we will be decoding the new quarterly activity report format and the new annual activity report format to understand in detail what changes SEBI has made to the reportings and how these will impact funds. Are there any new changes added? And well, to understand whether this has truly simplified the process or made this even more granular for us. So let's dive right in. Let us begin by understanding the revised and simplified quarterly activity report format. Now, one thing which you should note is that the old quarterly activity report format that was there before the circular came in, as per that, whatever fields have been given, they have been divided between the simplified quarterly activity report and the annual activity report. So everything still has to be given. It's just been divided into the two. So first we'll see what the quarterly activity report format, the simplified one, says. You can see here there are only 3 fields instead of 27 fields as it is there in the previous quarterly activity report format. Key changes. What are the key items that you have to actually disclose now to SEBI? One is details of capital raised. Again, this is very important. One key change I saw that SEBI made here is that instead of calling it commitment signed as at end of the quarter, SEBI has said total written commitment signed instead of just saying commitments received. So some change in terminology to signify that you need to have an actual written contribution agreement to show that you have a written signed commitment to report to SEBI. So that is one change they have made. And they have again other rest of the things that are the same: funds raised, cumulative reinvestment, drawdown, portfolio investments made, etc. as you were reporting on an ongoing basis. Next, we have details of investments. Now here they have also added one more thing, which is they have added the cost of holding as at end of period for all investments including offshore. So this they have added, like you have to add the cost of holding. So cost of holding all the investments including offshore investments. This has to also be reported to SEBI in addition to the name of the investee company, type of security, latest value, etc. So SEBI will know what a cost is as well. Now we have information on investors. Again, as we have been disclosing previously, first is details on the number of investors. Then you talk about how much commitments have you received, and last you talk about how many funds have you raised from them. Funds raised would be amount you've drawn down from them or capital that you've actually called from them. Now here what we see is that SEBI has gone into great detail into specifying the sponsor and manager, and they have been divided into 5. So under the previous format, which was there under the previous quarterly activity reporting format, it used to just be sponsor. You could just say how much commitment have you received from sponsor, how many number of investors, and that also you would just say just sponsor was one field. Now the sponsor field has been divided into 5, which is resident individual, non-resident individual, domestic owned and controlled resident non-individual, foreign owned and controlled resident non-individual, and foreign owned and controlled non-resident non-individual. So all the permutation combinations SEBI has gone into here. This is very, very relevant if you look at it from an NDI rule standpoint, because as we know, Schedule 8 of the NDI rules provides that in case of the manager or sponsor being foreign owned and controlled, the AIF would be treated as a foreign owned and controlled investment vehicle. And it's very important to determine whether or not the manager and sponsor are Indian owned and controlled or foreign owned and controlled. And the same thing will now be reported as well on a quarterly basis to SEBI. Same for manager, same differentiations have been given. Then you have, as previously we had, this is director, partners, employees or sponsor, manager, EBTs. Now in domestic, they have added some more things as well. In domestic investors category, we now also have to tell details of funds received from HUF, from firms, that is partnership firm. LLP was always there from before, and also details of fund raised from NGOs and charities, that has been added as well. This has been mapped across details of number of investors, commitment received from various category of investors in AIFs and the funds raised. So it's the same table for all of them. And then we just have a sector list. So now, as you can see, the quarterly activity report format has actually been super simple. This list has no changes. The sector list stays the same as previous, and all that you have to now give SEBI is how much have you raised, details of capital raised, details of investments made, and a breakdown of your investors information. That's all. So this actually becomes very simple. Now let's move on to understand what the annual activity report says. So here we have the detailed annual activity report that has to be submitted to SEBI within 30 days of the end of financial year. This is going to be for all financial years except for this year, that is 2026. The annual activity report has to be submitted by 31st of May 2026. Every other year is going to be from 30th of April. Now, the first part is the same as the previous quarterly reporting format, except the points I've highlighted in yellow are the ones that they have added as new points. So one is contact number of the sponsor. Then you have to also mention if the sponsor is registered with other financial sector regulator in India. Then provide nature of registration, else mention NA. This typically is information that you would give when you apply to SEBI for registration. That time SEBI asks if a sponsor or manager are registered with any other financial regulators. Details of the registrations, this again has to be given on an annual basis, because I think SEBI also understood that maybe sponsor is not registered at the time of making an application to SEBI, but they could be registered on a later date. So this is something we should give to them. Next we have type of entity. Name of the type of entity is again one new thing. We have to refer to note 5 here. So they have given a drop down. Again the same as we saw in the quarterly activity reporting format, which is resident individual, NRI, domestic owned and controlled resident individual. The same 5 categories that we saw in the quarterly format have been given here as well for the type of entity of the sponsor. Same to same has been done for the manager, contact number, registration with financial service sector regulator, and type of entity for manager as well. Now you have to also give details of custodian, RTA and compliance officer. So previously also we had to give the name of the custodian, name of RTA. The new things that have been added are that you have to now also disclose whether the custodian is an associate of the sponsor or manager of AIF. If yes, whether compliant with regulation 2011A of the AIF regulation. So even this they have asked. There are detailed guidelines provided in case the custodian is an associate of the manager and sponsor. Now name of the relevant NISM certification of compliance officer. This also has to be given. This is a new certification that has come in for compliance officers, wherein compliance officers of AIFs have to obtain certification 3C of NISM, and the deadline to obtain the certification is 31st of December 2026. So this year end is when you have to obtain the certification, and they've asked the name of relevant certification, date of relevant NISM certification, and date of expiry as well. So this has also been added. Now we have the rest details being the same. The KMP details are now moved to the annual format. You don't have to give on a quarterly basis who the KMP are. I think that's a good change, because it's not very often that on a quarterly basis the key management personnel of the fund will change, and they can tell these details on an annual basis. That ideally should suffice. The NISM details for the KMP also are the new thing that have been added in the annual reporting format. So what you can see from this is that SEBI actually tries to see where all there are direct regulatory non-compliances. Maybe you don't have the NISM certificate. Very simple to catch regulatory non-compliance. Custodian is an associate. Again, something that you're supposed to check. So all of these sanity checks have been done by SEBI in this annual activity report. You have to now maintain the NISM certification, date of obtaining it and date of expiry, both for NISM 19 CDE, that are for the key management personnel, and NISM 3C, that is for the compliance officer. Now we have general information about schemes, where we have the general details, name, PAN, status. Here an important thing that they've asked is whether units of the scheme have been dematerialized. So this is also something that is new, and we have to mention this as well. This is again something that could become a non-compliance if the units of the schemes have not been dematerialized, as there's a mandate that units have to be issued in a dematerialized format only. And then provide issuer ID of the scheme. Is the scheme an AI only scheme, or something they have asked newly? Whether scheme is an LVF, manager has facilitated co-investment. If yes, who was the co-investor? So even details of a co-investors have to be submitted. And if the manager is registered under the PMS regulations, provide PMS regulation number. So those are there from before. Date of launch of scheme, again same as previous, where you have to mention the initial close date, total commitments received, final close date. So here in details of tenure of the schemes of AIF, there are multiple changes that have been made. First is that in the original quarterly reporting format, we had the name of the scheme, tenure not including extension, end date of initial term of the scheme, any extensions, extended date of the tenure. Now what you have here is first you have to give the original tenure of the scheme, then the end date of the original tenure, just minor change in terminology. Instead of initial term they're calling it original tenure. Then you say whether the tenure has been extended. If yes, then provide the percentage of investors by value who approved that extension. Now this is a new compliance requirement that has come in. This was not there previously. If the answer to D is yes, that is the tenure has been extended, provide the end date of the extended term. So this was there before also, the end date of the extension term. The extended term was there previously. If the liquidation period is expired, please confirm that all assets are liquidated and proceeds distributed to investors. So this is also something that is new and very, very important, because they used to not ask this specific thing before, whether all assets are liquidated and proceeds distributed to investors. This is something typically SEBI would ask if you reach out to them for winding up of the scheme and you apply for winding up of the scheme, but not there in the quarterly reporting format. And date of final distribution is also asked here. So this is also something very new. Amount held back in the scheme, if any. So this is typically reserves that funds would hold back, maybe for litigation expenses or any other expenses that they have. SEBI even released a detailed consultation paper on this, on what amounts fund can hold back, and they have given detailed guidelines and different scenarios where managers may hold back funds. And if the answer to column G is no, then confirm whether scheme has entered dissolution period. This is also new. While the dissolution period was included before and was introduced previously only by SEBI, it wasn't included in the quarterly activity reporting format. So that has also come in. So now for tenure, as we have seen, there are multiple orders. SEBI even now released the recent VCF settlement order. We have seen that SEBI has really become very strict about the tenure of the schemes, and detailed granular evidence is being asked even in the annual activity report. So make sure that you save those evidences. Now in case schemes have entered dissolution period, then the entire details of dissolution period have to be provided. This whole thing is new, which was not there previously, because dissolution period itself was not mentioned in the previous reporting format. So now what you have to mention if you have entered dissolution period is percentage investors who approved entering in dissolution period, date of intimation to SEBI of investor approval regarding entering dissolution period. So make sure that you intimate SEBI that you have entered dissolution period. Typically you would do that because you would even file an information memorandum with them to enter dissolution period. Whether bids received for minimum 25% of value of unliquidated investments. If yes, whether exit was provided to dissenting investors, whether bidder or related parties were provided exit out of the bid, cost of unliquidated investments that entered dissolution period, value of unliquidated investments reported to performance benchmarking agencies, percentage management fees charged during dissolution period. This is also very interesting. SEBI now wants to know how much fees are you going to charge in the dissolution period, tenure of dissolution period, end date of dissolution period. If this has expired, whether all assets are liquidated and proceeds distributed to investors. If no, then confirm whether mandatory in-specie distribution has been done. So the entire gamut of what all will be done in the dissolution period is supposed to be reported annually, and very detailed information is being sought by SEBI here. Similarly, we have details of in-specie distribution. Here also SEBI has added this new thing about whether bids receive from minimum 25% of value of investments. So previously it used to just be that whether bids are arranged for the unliquidated investments, value of bid received. And now SEBI is asking, if yes, whether exit was provided to dissenting investors, whether bidder or related parties were provided exit out of the bid, cost of unliquidated investments that were distributed in specie. So very, very detailed information is being asked here also. Of course, in specie distribution was there previously, but now you can see that the specific questions inside this have really changed, and SEBI is asking much more information here. We also have details of mandatory in specie distribution coming in, which again were there before, but importantly here you have to also tell the value of unliquidated investments reported to performance benchmarking agencies, which was not there previously. The date of final distribution of course is there, and previously under the previous quarterly reporting format, SEBI used to also ask number of investors that accepted in specie distribution and number of investors that did not accept in specie distribution. So that has been removed. Instead what they are asking is value of unliquidated investments reported to performance benchmarking agencies and date of final in specie distribution here only. Now we have next is cumulative capital raised and invested. So this, as you can see, is very similar to what was there previously. So written commitment signed, and this we are also giving on a quarterly basis. So the same thing has been provided here as well to SEBI also. So what we are reporting on a quarterly basis. Some new things in this table on details of capital raised are firstly You have to also disclose the cumulative reinvestment drawdown made as at end of the reporting period. So the reinvestment drawdown also has to be disclosed to SEBI. And importantly, you have to also tell them the cash in hand as at end of the reporting period. This also has to be reported to SEBI. The other disclosures that are required here are same as the previous quarterly reporting format. Of course, on the simplified quarterly reporting format, there's even less disclosure items as we saw, but the rest of the things are same as the previous quarterly reporting format that was there. Next is calculation of investable funds. So this is again something that has to be done, and a very, very important point for SEBI to see whether you are calculating investable funds and following the requirements. That is for category 1 and 2, 25% of investable funds. You cannot invest more than 25% of investable funds in one portfolio company. And for category 3, it is 10%. Again, for LVFs, it becomes double. So category 1 and 2 LVFs, 50% of investable funds. In category 3 LVFs, it is 20% of investable funds. So here what we can see is that it's the same calculation as has been provided previously. And you have to disclose this also on an ongoing basis as we have been doing. Next, we have details of investments that are made. So here we are again disclosing this on an annual basis. Here SEBI is asking whether scheme has any portfolio holdings at the end of the reporting period. This is new now. Every time you'll see in many of these tables, first SEBI will ask whether this is there, yes or no, and then you move on. So name of investee company, PAN, type, this is again same as before, type of security. Importantly, ratings of listed or proposed to be listed debt security, this is something new. And also importantly, is investment held in demat form? This is very, very important. SEBI has mandated that all AIFs must hold the investments only in demat form. So you have to check this and report this as well. So this is again something very critical. And then the ISIN if available. So that also has to be given if you have ISIN available. So ISIN available was there previously also, but not this, whether the investment is held in demat form. The rest of the details are again same as before, whether managed or sponsored. Now, 3 new things again have been added in the investments reporting, which is after the rate of latest valuation, you have to mention percentage of deviation in the value of per unit security between 2 consecutive valuations. This is coming from the requirements of valuation under the master circular, which mention that if there is a deviation of more than 33% in a financial year or more than 20% between 2 consecutive valuations, you have to report to the investors the reasoning for why the valuations are different. And you can talk about whether the methodology has changed, and SEBI has given very detailed requirements in the master circular. I think it is under clause 22 of the master circular. So that has been provided. You have to now mention if there is a deviation, the deviation in value per unit security in a financial year also. So 2 consecutive is 20%, in a financial year is 33%. Both of these you have to mention if deviation is there. And date of reporting to investors, a reason for deviation. And here you can refer to note 8 also, which actually says that for the purpose. So note 8 says clause 22.1.1 or 22.2.1 of the master circular. If not applicable, then report null. So ideally what SEBI could have also mentioned is that in case of listed investments, this may not be applicable because listed investments typically would not be valued by a independent value, and they may look at the listing value. So there may be deviation happening in a year, but there won't really be reasons like the one in an unlisted investment where they would explain why there was a bigger change. So maybe that could be clarified. And valuation considered for the scheme's latest NAV to be provided for listed securities, valuation based on latest available closing prices have to be provided. Now importantly, they've added a whole new table which is details of investments not in demat form. So this has also been added. So whether any investments which are mandatory to be in demat are in physical form, you have to say that. If yes, give the name of the security, date of acquisition and amount of investment in crores. So this is very important. This is something SEBI may now find out if fund managers are not following this compliance requirement of holding securities in demat form. Detail of temporary investments and RFQ is same as before. Now we have again the same requirements that we are giving on a quarterly basis in the simplified format. That is breakup of investors in the AIF. The same thing has been provided here also. So those breakup you give on an annual basis as well. Again, who are the investors, number of sponsor, manager, domestic, foreign investors. How much have you received commitment from them and how many funds are raised from them. Now importantly, again this is a very interesting new requirement that is coming from SEBI, is the introduction of table 17, which is details of accredited and other investors. As you know, SEBI is really pushing accredited investors and has already asked angel funds to raise only from accredited investors, and said that SEBI wants the industry to eventually be raising only from accredited investors. Here they have asked the details of number of investors in the AIF, and you have to tell sponsor, manager, director, partners and AI investors other than sponsor manager and non-AI investors other than sponsor and manager. So now a lot of funds may not be specifically raising from accredited investors but may have accredited investors. They have to now check in their investors who are accredited and who are not accredited and report that to SEBI. So some funds choose to give a lower commitment amount to accredited investors because actually SEBI allows that if you are accredited you may invest a lower capital commitment amount. Some funds choose to raise from these accredited investors and accept a lower capital commitment amount, but they may not know if their investors who have invested more and who have not sought the benefit of accreditation, whether they are accredited or not. So now every fund has to check this with the investors to find out if they are accredited or not and report this to SEBI. You have to also disclose a commitment received from various categories of investors. Again, how much commitments have you received from accredited and non-accredited, and funds raised from accredited and non-accredited. Another new introduction is table 18. Data to be provided for units lying in escrow accounts. You have to mention how many units are lying in escrow account. Give granular details of that data on the units that are there in the escrow account. So this is also something new. Total units issued, percentage of units lying in escrow account, unique number of investors to which escrow belongs, total number of unique investors, percentage of unique investors units lying in escrow account has to be given. Next is same as before, the details of investor consent. This we were giving in the previous quarterly reporting format as well. But a new introduction here is the introduction of the investor consent method, which is in note 4, where now you have to also disclose to SEBI whether consent has been sought via positive consent method, deemed consent method, or present and voting. And this again, we will see how SEBI now interprets this and whether SEBI prevents funds from seeking consent via deemed consent method. But this has to also be given now. Next is details of borrowing by AIF. Here the new things which have been added are proposed investment in investee company. So first you have to say whether the scheme has borrowed during the reporting period, yes or no. Again, this SEBI has done across all the tables now. Yes or no questions at the start. Amount outstanding at the beginning of the reporting period, date of borrowing, investable funds as on borrowing, amount borrowed during reporting period. Now proposed investment in the investee company. Here this is mandatory only if the purpose chosen is for meeting temporary shortfall in drawdown. So there was a SEBI circular released in 2025 where SEBI said that funds may choose to do borrowing for the purpose of meeting temporary shortfall in drawdown. So now if that is a purpose that you have chosen in note 3, then you will mention here the proposed investment in the investee company as well. The cost of borrowing charged to, so you have to give the cost of borrowing charged to investors, and commitment pending to be drawn down from investors other than delaying or defaulting investors. So from the remaining investors, what is the commitment that is pending to be drawn down? That also has to be given. Rest is the same, which is date of repayment, amount repaid, amount outstanding. This we were reporting previously as well. But in case of temporary shortfall and drawdown, make sure that you have the relevant details here to complete the compliance requirements. Now next, in details of latest valuation. Here again there are a lot of changes. So first you have to say whether scheme has any holdings during the reporting period, frequency of valuation. Now they're asking for category 3 AIF, valuation of listed securities is conducted by, and here they're saying will be open for entry and mandatory only if it is a category 3 AIF and if the particular scheme had any holdings during the reporting period, else will remain locked. So if the category 3 AIF has holdings during the reporting period, then this would remain open, else this will remain locked. And the drop down list of fund management team. So who is conducting the valuation of listed equity securities? One option is fund management team, second option is internal valuer but independent from fund management function, and third is independent valuer. So this is again very interesting. You have to see what you report here and who is conducting the valuation of these listed securities. For category 3 AIFs, a valuation of unlisted securities and listed debt securities is conducted by, so again from these three options you have to choose fund management team, internal valuer but independent from fund management function, and independent valuer. Next is latest valuation of scheme, date of latest valuation, name of valuers, whether any valuers associate, etc. And another new point that has been added is whether the latest required information submitted to performance benchmarking agencies. So you have to also mention whether you have submitted the latest information to the performance benchmarking agencies as that is required. Now in details of distribution fees, this was also there previously, but here again they have added some new points. So for distribution fees, what they are asking is that total distribution fees charged over the tenure have to be given. So that is again a new point that they've added. Next, we have details of warehouse investments of AIFs. Here again, you have to say yes or no whether the fund has warehoused any investments. And if yes, then you have to give the details of the warehouse investment. The details are same as they were there in the previous reporting format. So, details of final close, name of the warehouse investment type, name of warehousing entity, relationship of warehousing entity, etc. That is remaining the same. In the rest of the reporting formats, let's just see where there is a big change that has come in. So in the rest of the tables, as we can see, for reporting of suspension of redemptions by open-ended category 3 AIFs, there's no change. No change in non-compliance is reported by compliance officer. No change in details with respect to latest compliance test report or details of complaints or data pertaining to leverage undertaken by category 3 AIFs. So all of that remains the same as per the previous quarterly reporting format. The sector list that we saw in the simplified quarterly reporting format also remains the same, and we have basically all of these disclosures to be made and submissions to be made accordingly. So as we can see, this annual activity reporting format that has been released by SEBI is extremely comprehensive, and a lot of points have been added that were not even there in the previous quarterly reporting format, thereby requiring funds to ensure that your compliance is top notch. And a lot of these things you have to seek information from investors, from investments, to figure out whether you have been complying on a lot of these points. And if you have any other questions with respect to the annual activity reporting format or the quarterly activity reporting format, feel free to drop them in the comment box. I'm happy to discuss them with you. Take care. Happy to discuss them with you. Thank you.